All right, it's Jon Reed. I'm joined by Brian Sommer. We're post Acumatica analyst event in Boston. We're here to talk about HR tech this time around and talent in general and some myths of talent, myths of hiring, and a bunch of stuff you want to blow up because you're getting ready to go to the HR tech conference in October. So we got to get you good and wound up so you can really let loose there.
I think I'm already getting in wound up shape, and I'm still a month or more away. But
you've already blown your stack once today, so maybe we can get it on audio for the second time. So you've got an HBR article out in front of you that sort of lit a fire. What's that all about?
Well, the article is titled "Talent: Why People Quit Their Jobs," and it also has a nice sidebar with it. It's in the current, I think, issue of the Harvard Business Review, and what it talks about is things we all know about, like why people leave. And there are a lot of analytic tools in HR that help predict who is maybe at risk for leaving an organization. And so the big focus in HR are analytic tools to predict attrition or retention issues, what have you. But when I read this article, boy, it really got my attention because these folks did a whole lot more homework on it. Before I tell you what HBR's writer said, the current wave of technology looks at little signals like, oh, Jon Reed here has cashed in all of his stock options, and he's used up all his vacation days, and he's updated his LinkedIn profile 6 times this month when he didn't update it once in the whole last year or two. Those are the indicators that Jon might be actually thinking about leaving and going to look for true love elsewhere with another employer.
Right.
Now, that sounds great, but the problem with this is and the article kind of points out to it, is even if you gave an employment manager or executive that data point, like somebody here is at risk, what are they supposed to do with that knowledge? Because by the time the analytic figured this out, it's too late.
And what if I hate my manager?
Oh, that's even more.
And my manager sits me down and say, hey, I know you've been blah, blah, blah. And
looking on LinkedIn and updating.
I'm like, well, if you would quit, I'll stay.
Yeah, because we all know that about 2/3 of the time people quit their boss, not their employer. Well, what the article was talking about, and I thought was fantastic, was that they did more root cause analysis, and they asked themselves, when do people start thinking about leaving their employer? Because that's what the analytics aren't getting right today. They've already, by the time the analytics are looking at data, even in big data sources, people have already started like updating their resume and everything on LinkedIn. It's too late in most cases to, do something about that or create an intervention. No, what they should be doing, what this article talked about, it says a lot of people get real introspective at key birthdays, like when you turn 30 and you got to look at yourself and go, or turn 40 or 50, whatever it is. And you go, I haven't really been the world beater star that I thought it was going to be when I joined this company.
Funny how that works.
And and you decide, I need to do something different. I need to get my act in gear and do something different about that. Wouldn't it be nice if a company and a management team or whatever, and an HR group actually knew, like, oh, you're going to be turning 38. Maybe we should start having more conversations with you about your career. Where's it going? What kind of training you need? Where do we have you on the succession plan or the leadership development pipeline, so that by the time you do turn, say, 40, you're not worried about your career. You now see it's back on track. It's where it needs to be. So it's kind
of an intelligent career intervention then, right?
Yeah, that's done maybe months, years in advance. Yeah,
before you're updating your profile.
Correct. Yeah, it preempts that. That's the problem with the HR analytics right now, is they're looking at post facto data points and that aren't going to probably result in a whole lot of change. It's probably going to creep out a bunch of people when their boss comes walking up and says, hey, I noticed 5 minutes ago you just updated your LinkedIn page again. Right. We need to have a talk. Man, if somebody did that to me, I'd go, I think we need to go have a talk with the HR and in-house counsel, because I think you're invading my privacy here. Anyway, that's a sidebar.
And it ties into this other issue, which is that, there's the so-called war for talent, but oftentimes it seems to me like the talent that companies want is within their grasp if they would just simply change certain policies or approaches.
Right.
You see it so many times. I mean, think, for example, we got to have people on site Monday through Friday, thereby eliminating people who would have to work from home because they have a kid at home or whatever,
or even need to work one day a week at home or something like that.
So tell me about recruiting software and how can we fix any of these problems? Or
well, I'd love to hear the recruiting vendors actually solve the war for talent, because right now their way of solving it is to process more resumes, to broaden the net wider with outside people to bring in. And they do. I think the technology that's out there right now is reprehensible in its limited scope and capability. And it's not doing anything to actually solve these war for talent problems.
But you can do keyword searches on skills, which is great.
Right. This stuff just torques me off. And I know, John, you were in the HR business in a prior life, and you would get this right away. I bet you haven't gotten an inbound request in ages where somebody wants you to get back into that business, have they?
Nope. No. It's dead in the water.
And you know why? Because that information is probably on the bottom half of your resume. And most companies only look at what you're doing today.
Right.
And they assume that all people are one-dimensional beings, that they only have one role in life, and that is to do the current job they're currently doing for some other firm. And that is a horrible misuse and misunderstanding of what recruiting really should be all about. Recruiters and recruiting technology, if it was smart, would look particularly at older workers. Like anybody who's like 35 or 40 years old and beyond has probably had 2 or 3 really meaty different roles in their career already. And they could do multiple different things if a company or recruiting technology was smart enough to go look and see what those are.
But don't you think the root of that problem is that companies have given into the rules of the free agent economy and just figured, well, if I hire that experienced person you're describing, I will have to train them on this tool or that, and I don't want to do that because I want someone who can hit the ground running tomorrow. Like there's a lack of willingness to invest in the long term for employees, right?
Isn't that
a big part of the problem?
That is a part of the problem, but
so how do we overcome that?
Well, first of all, the companies have no choice but to develop talent. And we don't do a service by calling this thing the war for talent, because they're people, they're not buying weapons or anything else. Okay. What's really going on is there is a labor pool out there, and the smart companies find ways to capture the best people within that talent pool, and they hang on to them as long as they possibly can. What's missing here is that companies seem to think that they have no responsibility to train or develop talent, and if that's the case, then they're almost doomed to always be short people and short skills.
And how does this impact older workers? Didn't you mention to me before we started taping that you think there's some age discrimination going on and some lack of ability to tap into that talent?
Yeah, well, so there will be vendors I will see at the show, and they sell like salary data. And guess what? A lot of the companies that buy that, they use that because they only want to hire people into roles who are going to be paid in the bottom half of the pay scale. Mm-hmm. Well, that almost by design means you're only going to get people who are like right out of school and are going to be starting entry-level kind of roles. And yet they may have qualified people in their own firm or available from other companies or people who've done this job before, but they won't touch them because they may actually have to pay at the midpoint or slightly higher to get them into the company. The amount of age, or the other thing is you've got recruiting technology and recruiters who only want to look like, say, on campuses for people, and they won't look elsewhere and beyond that.
It seems like the other issue with HR software is that a lot of times the software for handling contingent labor is totally separate from the software for handling permanent hires, and also it's being handled one through procurement, one through HR, whereas people are going through much more fluid experiences in their jobs, right? Where, I'm taking a perm job, I'm taking a contract, like we're more and more becoming flexible in how we work, but the software doesn't feel flexible to me.
No, not at all. And there's no place in most recruiting software for you to put down like the entire universe of like skills and experiences you picked up along the way doing like all of these gigs or whatever. And even if you could stuff it in there, I mean, I've got a CV that's 27 pages long.
Oh, Jesus.
It's got I'm sure it has every buzzword and ERP brand name known to mankind.
Every Toastmasters meeting you ever attended.
Yeah. But it's got all that in there. And yet it won't do the job. No one's going to go wade through that. You know, we've not taken the time to structure the recruiting process to actually find the best talent. And if I could just leave you with this one thought on this, when you ask me about companies that aren't willing to make investments or everything else, generally those are the kind of company that don't refer to human beings as people or employees. Right. They call them bodies or butts and seats.
Head count, baby.
Yeah. And I find those terms offensive beyond belief, but it speaks volumes to the rather uninformed kind of way with which they're approaching workforce issues. And it's one of the reasons why those are going to be the companies still carping and moaning about, we still can't find our talent, to fill their spots.
Okay, last question. Do you think HR has a seat at the boardroom table? Because I'm under the impression generally that HR doesn't, the reason being that I'm not sure HR has really proven that it's a strategic asset to the business. My theory is if they can prove that and get a seat at the table, then a lot of good things will happen.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a chicken and the egg thing, but there are some very strategic thinking and brilliant, like chief HR officers that I have run into in my life. There are also a whole bunch that are very tactical, transactional kind of oriented people. If you want the seat at the executive committee, you have to walk in the room with something of value to the committee itself, to your other peers on the executive team. In a preview, I will tell you, I did see a rather cool product. I got a pre-briefing on it just last week that will save chief HR officers not only a lot of time, but it synthesizes information about what are the strategic things they need to be bringing forward. And on that more positive note, I would tell you there is something of value that I'll see in a goodness perspective coming out of that show.
All right. So for you beleaguered HR professionals listening, you do have a chance to turn this narrative around. Brian still has faith. Man, I think HR tech vendors are really looking forward to talking to you, Brian. Just as much as Acumatica had fun with you today, so that's going to be great.
I mean, you make it sound like I'm bad news all the way around, man.
No, man, it's makes it interesting for everyone. So, and I'll look forward to your content. Good luck at the show.
Thanks, appreciate it, John.